really give the microphone to my partner I'm working with on safer tourism, what is now also part of the Travel News Group, Dr. Peter Tarlow.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending upon wherever you are. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I also want to say that tomorrow we're going to be doing a very similar conference again in Spanish. So we're going bilingual. Today it will be in English. Tomorrow at the same time, it will be done in Spanish. The tourism world is facing probably the biggest crisis we've ever known. It's the first time that I think many of us, at least for part of the last few months,
can't hear you anymore, Peter. Peter, can't hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Peter, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, Jürgen muted me too. Let me start again. Did everybody hear the first part, or should I start all over?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do the first part again?
Yes, please.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This has been a day of some technical difficulties, but just like we had to get past COVID, we're also going to have to get past technical difficulties. It's part of the new world in which we live. We're going to be doing this conference. It's actually bilingual. Today, it's being done in English. Tomorrow, we're going to do very much the same issues, but again in Spanish. So if you'd like to tune in tomorrow in Spanish, both will be on YouTube's, everything we do today and everything we do tomorrow. So if you miss something, you don't have to take notes. You'll be able to see it on YouTube. For those of you who don't know me, I've worked for the last 25 years in issues of tourism security. I've worked on everything from 3 international Olympic Games, World Cup Games. I've worked with cities, countries, communities around the world to create a tourism industry that is safe, secure, and now healthy. And we often call that tourism surety, which is where you bring safety, security, health, reputation, and economics together. And all of those are very important. Now we're facing for the first time probably the greatest crisis that the tourism industry has ever known. Certainly in the last few months, all of us at one point or another have questioned if tourism is going to continue. We went in January from the world's greatest industry and probably the most profitable to by the end of March or beginning of April, it's almost ceased to exist. Airlines were 96 to 97% empty. Streets were empty. Hotels were empty. Convention and visitor bureaus wondered how they would make payrolls. The Las Vegas Strip was blacked out, which is never heard of. And it doesn't matter if you were in Paris or Tokyo, the Olympics were postponed, or Las Vegas or New York, or greetings from here from beautiful Texas, where it's a wonderful and beautiful day. Wherever we were, we worried about it. And so we have been struggling, all of us, one way or the other, to come up with ideas. Today, one of the ideas we were going to propose to you, and I'm working very closely with Jamaica, and my friend and colleague, Dr. Andrew Spencer will be speaking in just a few moments after I present. But the whole idea of creating some way that we can face COVID-19 head on. Now, many people started to use terms such as COVID-free zones or COVID-safe zones. I will tell you, as someone who works in risk management, those are dangerous terms. First of all, there is no such thing as 100% security, 100% freedom. No matter how you check it, someone can get through a system and it can create terrible problems. Not only reputational problems, but I'm in the United States often called to be a witness, an expert witness in law cases. And I live in a country whose national sport is suing. And I will tell you that you have to be extraordinarily careful of what you say in your terminology, because it can come back to bite you afterwards. So instead, we're proposing the concept of a COVID resilience zone. Why resilience? Because resilience indicates 3 stages. The first stage is, how do we make that area, that zone, whatever we want, choose to define it, as least dangerous as possible. Again, and someone who works in risk management will tell you, you never speak in the positive, and that you always speak in the negative. In other words, I cannot assure you it is 100% safe. What I can say is I will work hard to make it the least dangerous possible. So the first part of it is going through and creating ways of checking that zone and knowing. That means we're going to have to create protocols, guidelines. What do we expect to be able to say for a COVID resilience center? But secondly, resilience means you're not going to get us down. So while we are checking to make sure that people are in the least danger possible, we're also finding ways to keeping the economy going, creating economic opportunities, and finding ways to bounce back. That's what the resilience is all about. It's not just being down, it's also bouncing back. Now that means there's lots of projects that are going to have to be created. Many of you know that one of the definitions of a crisis is the place where danger and opportunity come together. We can either take the road to danger or we can take the road to opportunity. By calling it a COVID resilience zone, what we're saying is we're looking for those opportunities to bring tourism back. It may come back in different formats. For a while, there may not be long-term, long-haul travel. Instead, it may have to be domestic travel or regional travel. There may be that we're going to have to find ways of going after specific demographics within the population. Some people who before traveled may not be able to take the health risk that we used to take and assume would be okay. It means working with tourism as a full system. And one of the things I like to explain to people all the time is tourism is like the human body. I teach in a medical school. And the human body is a system. It's not any one organ. It's many organs that are working together. And if any one goes down, then the whole system can collapse. We call that death. We have to do the same within tourism. We have to be part of the health system, the economic system, the employment system. We have to be able to give people new opportunities. We have to be able to find ways to create hope and resilience. And those may be the two most important words we have. One is the hope that we have within us, the ability to find that resilience. Now, again, what we are working on now is to help not for the whole world, because you can't do that, but rather what we would like to be able to do is work with each individual place, be it Jordan, be it Israel, be it France, be it Spain, be it Asia, but each individual place to create a resilience, a COVID resilience zone according to the needs of that one place. One size will not fit all. Different cultures, different languages, different ways that people operate are going to indicate that we're going to have to create a world in which we all have a general pattern, but then within that general pattern, we have to work on individuality. If we're all the same, tourism ceases to exist. Why travel? One of the key elements of tourism is the ability to be able to say, vive la différence, to see the difference between each of us and to celebrate that difference. And so it is in our diversity that we will be able to find our strength. Now that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to mean that we're going to have to work with political powers, government powers, private industry, and each place will have to develop its own concept of what it means by resilience and where it wants to go. Some people in some places may not want to go back to mass tourism. They may want to find another form of tourism. Other places may pine for the time that they could go back to mass tourism. Will there be cruise tourism, large airline tourism? How will we get terminals to work, be those cruise terminals or airports, in a way that the visitor knows that he or she is in the least danger possible from the moment you leave your home until the moment you arrive back? And that means working with everyone from in training. We're going to need to do lots of training from everyone from taxi cabs to police officers. We're going to have to teach people how to enforce the law and yet at the same time provide good customer service. Now that's going to take a lot of work. And that's going to mean that this will be a worldwide effort. On the other hand, if we're able to do that, then we're going to be able to create a new form of tourism, which will be bigger and better and more profitable in the years to come than even what it was prior to the onset of this crisis. So this is the beginning. It's going to be announced all over the world of a COVID resilient zones that are going to be looking at keeping the danger the least possible, but then showing the resilience to bounce back. In a second, I'm going to ask my friend and colleague, Dr. Andrew Spencer. I'm working with him in Jamaica. We are working to make Jamaica the safest possible island or the least dangerous island in the Caribbean, a place where people can come, have a wonderful time, and go back home healthier and happier than when they arrived. Now that's a big program to take place. And no one can guarantee 100%. None of us are God, but all of us have the ability to try to work to become God's partners in making this world a better place. So I'm going to ask Andrew if he'd like to say a few words about the Resilience Center in Jamaica, and then how we're taking some of these ideas. We just finished in Jamaica a major audit or assessment of the hotels across the nation of Jamaica, and began to look at such things as fairs and public offerings. And the next stage will be beaches and working with police across the island. So Andrew, I know you're here someplace, but I'm going to pass the baton over to you.
Thanks, Peter, my fellow God's partner. Thanks to you and Jürgen for the invitation. I think certainly you've summed it up quite well. The context in which we operate is something that none of us anticipated would have been happening in 2020. And I think if we thought about 2020, our ideas of 2020 might have been glorious. I mean, for Jamaica in particular, we had a record-breaking year last year. We had a target of 5 million visitors, earning $5 billion US and growing by 5%. And we were well on the way to that target, and then came COVID. So I'm quite excited by the partnership for sure on COVID resilience zones. And certainly in these COVID resilience spaces, one of the things we have to think about, as you've rightly said, Peter, is not just your resistance to something happening, but your ability to treat with if it does, and the ability to bounce back. So we've been looking at that in large part. I think what's important though is that Jamaica has always considered the notion of assurance to be an important part of what we do. And so the entire remit of the agency that I lead, which is the Tourism Product Development Company, focuses on a thing we call destination assurance. And you will admit that in this pandemic, destination assurance is now basically on steroids. It's a greater degree of assurance that's required. So Minister Bartlett, who would have loved to be here, has been speaking a lot lately about Generation C. So, you know, we've been caught up a lot with Generation X, Y, and Z, and the notion of Generation C, which is the rest of the entire world affected by COVID, which is really a new demographic, but also driven by new psychographic permutations, is our understanding that there's a hypersensitivity now to health concerns. So when we spoke, Peter, in the past about destination assurance, and we defined it in Jamaica as safety, security, and seamlessness, we were very clear about each of those tenets. The notion of safety, security, and seamlessness now is so critical to any idea of rebuilding tourism that we're going to have to be so in tune with what's happening globally, but also in understanding what's happening in our main source markets. And so we've taken an approach through what we call our Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, established by Minister Bartlett and co-chaired by Dr. Rafai, who is also on this call. And that center is intended to build the capacity and the ability of the tourism industry to respond in situations such as these. And that's an important thing. Tourism has to take the lead on what affects tourism. So in Jamaica, for example, we just ended a meeting with the Ministry of Health where tourism was taking the lead. Tourism recognized that there were some concerns, some nuances that would have affected tourism that the Ministry of Health might not have been aware of. And we took it upon ourselves to engage them for them to be a part of our process. And so our process really looks at 5 key steps. And it's this 5-step process. The first step is the development of robust protocols. We've spent a lot of time engaging all the members of our industry. We've looked at multiple groupings. We've engaged attractions, accommodations. We've engaged shopping. We've engaged the ground transportation. We've looked at water sports. We've looked at craft shops. We've looked at shopping centers. I could go on, but it's an exhaustive document. And the intention of this document is to make sure that we know what is going to create a safe space. So Peter speaks about the COVID resilient zones. Really, what does that mean to us? It means that you must be able to have the confidence to travel again with the notion that where you're going is just as safe as home, if not safer. And so that's the thinking. And while we can't prevent every single incident from happening, we have to be prepared to handle all the eventualities. So step 1 is the creation of robust protocols. The second thing is the training that Peter spoke about. We recognized from our agency at the TPDCO, a hardworking team of people who are about to engage in mass sensitization of all the areas of our society, not just tourism workers, because this is going to require behavior change throughout society. And that's what we're working on as the second step. The third step is what we call, we term it COVID security equipment, but everybody calls it PPEs. And I'm sure you're familiar with the expression PPEs. We're ramping that up. We're improving our resource capability in that area, and the Tourism Enhancement Fund is a key part of that in funding and helping entities to recognize their ability to equip themselves to operate in the new normal. The fourth step of that process for us is a very robust communication strategy that is going to drive both locally as well as internationally where we are in the process of being able to receive visitors to our shores. But all of this would not have been possible if we didn't have the umbrella organization of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, which we call the GTRCMT. It's a very long abbreviation, but it's going to, and I think this is one of the things we want to happen. Not only do we want to be thought leaders in what we're doing, but we want to lead in terms of action as well. And so I'll say more later, but those are my introductory remarks. I think it's going to have to be a brand new day, and that brand new day is going to require brand new thinking. It's going to require those who would normally like comfort zones to get out of those comfort zones and to start creating these COVID resilient zones. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think I need to be transparent and say that right now, Andrew and I are writing a book about tourism safety and security across the Caribbean. And we're working right now on a chapter dealing with the whole issue of how health and issues such as COVID will impact tourism throughout the Caribbean. Of course, many of you know that the Caribbean #1 industry is tourism, and it's its lifeline. And so, Andrew, I cannot tell you how proud I am to be associated with you and working to make Jamaica the wonderful tourism spot that it has been and will be in the future. Congratulations. You guys are doing a great job. I think, Jürgen, were there other people that we had?
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Let me just get in here. We have a line here, and I know we're really running late because of the technical issues. So we're going to have a Q&A after the event, because I know some of you planned 1 hour, and realistically we cannot finish it in 1 hour. So if there are questions, we're going to stay a little bit longer if you want, but anyone who needs to go after the meeting is fine. Otherwise, you can ask questions at this time. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this outline. It was quite an educational process, and we're very happy to join force with your project, and hopefully get many others in the world involved on talking about resilience. I think Taleb had a question.
Thank you so much. Thank you. No, I'm quite thankful, and I'm very impressed with the work that Peter and Andrew are doing. But I think we should not overlook one very important thing. is that what we need to look at now immediately is domestic and regional tourism first. Then we look at step 2. So I think we should not overlook the issue of domestic tourism, because domestic tourism is very, very important. I know that many people here do not believe that that's real tourism, but it is. Actually, I completely believe that a country that's not enjoyed by its people cannot and should not be enjoyed by anybody else. That's a matter of principle. So this is an opportunity for us to put things right again. Now I know that domestic tourism is not as good in balance of trade and in hard currency bringing in, but it keeps facilities open, it keeps jobs there. So we have to start with domestic tourism first. We have to have our people enjoy their own country first, and then the region around them, and then we go to the international part, which is connected to the Corona resilience zone. Thank you.
Talib, you're 100% right, especially in countries that are big enough to have domestic tourism. But that is part of the rebuilding. And if you remember, I said we're going to have to go in stages. It may be staycations, people first just in their own communities, then domestic tourism, regional tourism, and eventually we will be able to get, God willing, to international tourism. But that's going to be a stage, and we have to make each stage show resilience so that we're able to move on to the next stage. You cannot run until you can walk, and you cannot walk until you can crawl. So we have to rebuild and take this almost as if we're taking a child being reborn, and then therefore a sense of renaissance, of rebirth that's going on. So yes, your comments are very well taken.
If I may jump in on that point, it's a very, very important point. In fact, I think Talib just wanted to, create a nice segue for me to say what my 5th point was in terms of our strategy. I did say it was 5. And the 5th one is actually a staggered reopening. And that staggered reopening is really looking at that. What are the phases that need to come before we look at issues to do with long haul and other kinds of travel. So of course, domestic has to be a huge part of that. Regional travel has to be a critical part of that. We're going to be looking at some areas of the economy that need to open before others do. Of course, one of the challenges in the discussion with the Ministry of Health in Jamaica is that tourism has this symbiotic relationship with almost every other industry and sector. So the reality for us is that can you really fully open tourism without opening everything else? So the question about the sequencing of the opening, but it's going to be a staggered opening approach, and that's our 5th and final step in our approach.
Thank you.